Maybe it was a lie by omission, my response when the judge inquired into my history. Standing for jury selection in the city's case against Montez Lamont King, I denied having any relationship with the prosecution that might affect my objectivity. But when asked to divulge connections with the arresting officer, any history, I avoided glancing over at Lieutenant Horton, who sat in the witness stand. If Lieutenant Horton remembered me from the ride-along we shared many months earlier, she betrayed any signs of recognition. She looked perfectly composed with her hair pulled back into a tight bun and her uniform so neatly pressed and fitted that it lent her the authority of someone with a higher rank, like a chief or a general. But she remained polite and respectful of the central power in the room. In every response, the judge was followed by a quick and courteous, "Your Honor." I've always wanted to embody that same composure, not just in the courtroom, but every day. I've always been attracted to a life in uniform, always admired the idea of being seen and regarded as someone heroic, not like a superhero, although that is another fantasy. I guess what I mean is I've always wanted to be someone whose self-sacrifice would be honored and remembered. And all I'm saying is maybe this predilection toward meaningful sacrifice and the desire to demonstrate what some might consider duty is why, when asked by the judge if I had any history that might impact my ability to give a fair determination, I could feel my posture begin to mirror Lieutenant Horton, my back straightening, jaw tightening, as I looked solemnly at the head of the court and said, "No, Your Honor." Weeks prior to the detention of Lamont King during a routine traffic stop, I accompanied the lieutenant on a ride-along. I observed Horton respond to 3 incidents Halloween weekend. The first, a domestic disturbance between 2 drunk lovers. We arrived in a cop car to find an African-American woman wearing a Holy Navy sleeping gown, a burgundy fleece pullover, and lime bedroom slippers. She stood waiting for us in the street, in front of a weather-stripped shotgun home, sloping on its sinking foundation. "Wait here," Horton said. "Don't get out no matter what." Officer Horton's voice squawked through the radio mounted to the dashboard, numbers and her current location broadcast to this and other cop cars in the area. Alone in the cruiser, I noted the minimal accessories to Horton's car. On a handle that jutted out of the cab and through the driver's door to operate the searchlight mounted above the side mirror, Horton had hung 3 additional pairs of handcuffs. The stark reality that there might be a need for the handcuffs clashed with the only accent of color in the car, a glittering butterfly-shaped hair beret, clasped to the sun visor above her head, or above my head. Bedazzled with sparkling rainbow gems, the large clip could keep Horton's thick hair pulled tightly. The playful beret led me to wonder what Horton is like out of uniform. I tried to imagine her smiling, her laugh, perhaps a low hacking bark like a series of coughs, or maybe she snorts when she finds something really funny. Then I caught the clack pop of a screen door, and then the flash of a human body blasting out from the shotgun house. The body, a shouting woman, stumbling barefoot, barreled at Horton and the civilian in the street. I rose bolt upright in my seat, watching through the windshield, and Horton held up a flat palm in front of her, and the belligerent lady halted a few feet away, still screaming at the woman in fluffy lime slides. Her ashen dreads shook as she yelled. The gray ropes sprouting from her head matched the patches of gray scales covering the skin of her arms and legs. I guessed that she was the reason we had been called here. The pair might have been in their 50s or perhaps much younger and aged by poverty. They didn't resemble each other. Cousins, perhaps. Roommates, maybe. And Horton watched the 2 of them argue for a couple of minutes. Horton rested her hands on her waist, just above her utility belt, her fingers inches above her taser and her gun. And eventually Horton raised her hand out again and calmed them. And as she spoke, I could see the shoulders of the civilians slowly drop and the taut cords of their necks relaxed. The women nodded at each other, looking upset but somewhat in agreement. They turned away from Horton and returned to the house grumbling to each other, content enough with the threatening peace Horton had brought between them. And once they returned inside, Horton returned to the cruiser. I waited for her to settle into the driver's seat to call some words and numbers over the police radio before I asked, "Is everything okay?" "Oh yeah," she said. "Just a couple fighting. One got a little too drunk." And she smiled after that, recalling something she didn't share with me. Her lips twisted into a sly half crescent, crashing into her right cheek. She laughed a little too. A quick, goofy chuckle I could have never pictured. Lieutenant Horton and I made circuits around the city, a giant winding chain of streets linking the edges of gated communities and low-income housing developments. And the cruiser crept through one of the HUD apartment blocks, and kids playing in the parking lots froze as Horton and I rolled past. Basketballs slid into storm drains, and young girls and boys retreated slowly but steadily off the asphalt and onto the sidewalks and segments of brown grass leading to the shelter of their buildings. I noticed how the kids moved without taking their eyes off the cop car. Their bodies carried them away while their necks twisted to keep Horton and me in their sight. One little girl tripped over a curb, but popped onto her feet, her eyes on mine as Horton explained how people don't understand half of what officers actually do. "We aren't trying to be jerks," she said. "We're here to protect and serve. Yeah, there are a few bad cops, but it isn't all of us." We rode by a group of teenage boys gathered and laughing on the corner of one of the apartment structures. Their joking paused until they were in the rear view mirrors of the cruiser. "It's not fair, right?" Horton said. "For all officers to be judged just because of a few? Now that's what I call prejudice. And the majority of us just got into this to help people." And I asked Horton why she decided to be a cop. She told me she used to date an officer. She was in school to become a nurse then. Her boyfriend would often take her on ride-alongs. Horton found she enjoyed the driving, the hours, the workload, and the camaraderie between the officers. "It was fun," she said. And I caught a reflection of my grimace on the passenger side window. I didn't like the thought of law enforcement being fun. And she asked me why I'd come on a ride-along. And I said something about how I thought citizens had a duty to learn as much as they can about their local law enforcement. And I said something about community-oriented policing. And then, after several seconds of her silence, I confessed that some part of me has always wanted to protect others and serve communities I belong to. In another life, I said, I might have become a cop or a soldier. Horn told me I could join the force. The police department is in need of new officers, especially men of color, she said. She told me I could do a lot of good. I could inspire others. And I didn't ask who the others were or what I might inspire in them.